The emergency lights in the Galactic Council chamber cast long shadows across the worried faces of representatives from 47 different worlds. Admiral Taemin stood at the center of the massive circular room, his blue skin pale with exhaustion. In his six-fingered hands, he held a datapad that contained the worst news the galaxy had received in over 300 years. 17 star systems have fallen in the past month, Taemin announced, his voice echoing through the silent chamber. The Nexus swarm shows no signs of slowing down. They move through space like a plague, converting everything in their path. Fleet Commander Ha-Jin rose from her crystalline seat, her transparent body shimmering with anxiety. Our latest intelligence reports are even worse than we feared. The swarm isn't just destroying planets anymore. They're taking the populations and turning them into something else. Biomechanical hybrids that serve the collective. A murmur of fear rippled through the assembled delegates. The Nexus swarm had appeared from the dark space between galaxies 5 years ago. At first, they seemed like just another aggressive species trying to claim territory. But as time passed, the Council learned the horrible truth. The swarm didn't want land or resources. They wanted to remake every living thing in their own twisted image. Captain Jin Woo, a veteran from the Terran border conflicts, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His weathered face bore scars from battles most beings preferred to forget. The problem isn't just their numbers, he said, his gruff voice cutting through the worried chatter. It's how they learn. Every time we fight them, they get stronger. Every weapon we use against them becomes useless after the first battle. Explain, demanded Counselor Wu Jin, the elderly representative from the core worlds. His species had ruled the galaxy for millennia, and the idea that any force could threaten their empire was almost unthinkable. Jin Wu stood and activated a holographic display in the center of the chamber. The image showed a massive battle from 3 months ago. Hundreds of council ships faced off against a swarm fleet that looked like a collection of mechanical nightmares. Each swarm vessel was different, covered in writhing biomechanical parts that seemed to grow and change as the battle progressed. Watch this, Jin Woo said, pointing to a section of the display. We hit their lead ship with plasma cannons. Look, what happens? The council ships fired brilliant blue beams at the swarm vessel. The first few shots tore through the enemy's hull, causing significant damage. But as the attack continued, the holes began to close. The ship's surface rippled and changed, becoming reflective. Soon, the plasma beams were bouncing harmlessly. Off the target. Adaptive armor, Jin Woo continued. They analyze whatever hits them and evolve a defense in real time. By the end of that battle, nothing we had could even scratch their hulls. Dr. Young-suk, the Council's chief military scientist, added her own grim observations. We've tried everything: energy weapons, projectile weapons, biological agents, even experimental quantum disruptors. The swarm adapts to all of it. Some of our weapons actually made them stronger. The chamber fell silent again. Every being present understood what this meant. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations, working together, could not stop this threat. Their technology, refined over thousands of years, was useless against an enemy that could learn and adapt faster than they could innovate. There must be something, Counselor Miran said desperately. Her people had already lost 2 colony worlds to the swarm. Some weapon they haven't encountered? Some strategy they can't predict? Admiral Taemin looked around the chamber at the desperate faces of the galaxy's leaders. What he was about to suggest went against everything the Council stood for. For centuries, they had maintained their superiority by keeping the more primitive species at arm's length. But desperate times called for desperate measures. There is one option, he said slowly. One species whose military tactics are so unpredictable that they might work where conventional strategies have failed. A chill ran through the chamber. Everyone knew what he meant. "The humans," whispered Counselor Jae Sung, his tentacles writhing with disgust. "You're suggesting we ask the deathworlders for help?" Humans had joined the galactic community only 50 years ago, and their reputation preceded them. They came from a planet so dangerous that most council species required environmental suits just to visit. Their military history was a catalog of impossible victories, achieved through methods that defied all logical tactical doctrine. Captain Jin Woo nodded grimly. "I've fought alongside humans before. During the Void War, I watched one of their specialists, a man named Dong Hyun, single-handedly disable an entire swarm reconnaissance fleet." "How?" demanded Fleet Commander Hai Jin. "He used improvised explosives made from cleaning supplies and what he called aggressive negotiations," Jin Woo replied. "I still don't understand exactly what happened, but 3 enemy ships just stopped working. The swarm forces retreated rather than try to figure out what he'd done to them. Dr. Young-suk accessed her files on human military capabilities. Their technology is primitive by our standards, but their approach to warfare is completely alien. They use tactics that our computers classify as impossible or illogical. Perhaps that unpredictability is exactly what we need." "They're dangerous," Counselor Woo Jin protested. "Humans solve every problem with violence. They've been fighting wars on their own planet for their entire recorded history." "Which means they're very good at it," Jin Woo replied bluntly. "And right now, we need someone who's good at fighting impossible wars." Admiral Taemin called for order as the chamber erupted in heated debate. Some delegates argued that humanity was too primitive to help. Others worried that asking for human assistance would set a dangerous precedent. The core world's representatives insisted that their own military could handle the situation given more time. "We don't have more time," Taemin said firmly. "The swarm will reach the inner systems within 6 months. After that, it won't matter who we ask for help, because there won't be anyone left to help." The reality of their situation settled over the chamber like a heavy blanket. The Nexus swarm had already proven they could defeat any conventional military force. Their adaptive technology made traditional warfare obsolete. If the Council continued to fight using established tactics, they would lose. It was that simple. "I propose we send an official request to Earth Command," Taemin announced. "We'll offer them full access to our military databases and temporary council membership in exchange for their assistance against the swarm." The vote was closer than anyone expected. 24 delegates supported the proposal, 21 opposed it, and 2 abstained. By the narrowest possible margin, the Galactic Council agreed to ask for help from the species they had long considered too dangerous to trust. As the delegates filed out of the chamber, Captain Jin Woo remained behind, staring at the holographic display that still showed the devastating swarm battle. He remembered Dong Hyun's words after that impossible victory against the reconnaissance fleet. "Sometimes the best way to win a fight is to make sure your enemy can't figure out what you're trying to do." Jin Woo hoped the council understood what they were asking for. Humans didn't just think outside the box. They took the box apart, used the pieces to build something completely different, and then used that to solve problems nobody else even knew existed. It was exactly the kind of chaos the galaxy needed right now. The message to Earth would be sent within the hour. Soon, the Council would learn whether humanity's legendary unpredictability could save them all, or if they had just invited an even greater disaster into their midst. Admiral So Young sat in her office on Luna Base, reading the most unusual message Earth Command had received in decades. The Galactic Council's formal request for military assistance filled 3 pages with flowery diplomatic language. But the core message was simple. They were losing a war and needed human help to win it. She read the tactical summaries twice to make sure she understood correctly. The enemy, called the Nexus Swarm, could adapt to any conventional weapon system within minutes of first contact. Their ships were massive biomechanical constructs that learned from every battle, becoming stronger while their opponents grew weaker. In 5 years of warfare, no Council force had achieved a single meaningful victory. Fascinating, So Young murmured, setting down the datapad. She pressed a button on her desk. Commander Minho, please report to my office immediately. Lieutenant. Commander Minho arrived within minutes, his uniform crisp despite the early hour. As Earth's liaison to alien species, he had spent years studying Council military doctrine and politics. His expertise would be crucial in understanding exactly what humanity was being asked to do. You've read the Council's message? So Young asked. Yes, Admiral. 3 times, actually. It's quite remarkable. The most advanced civilizations in the galaxy are asking us for help. Minho paused, choosing his words carefully. It could be a trap, of course. The Council has never shown much respect for human military capabilities. So Young nodded. The relationship between Earth and the Galactic Council had always been complicated. Humans were considered a promising but primitive species, useful for manual labor and dangerous missions but not worthy of true partnership. This request suggested that opinion might be changing. What's your assessment of the threat? She asked. Minho activated a holographic display showing the swarm's area of control. Red zones marked conquered systems, spreading outward from the galactic rim like an infection. If their reports are accurate, this Nexus swarm represents an existential threat to all organic life in the galaxy. Their adaptive technology is unlike anything we've encountered. But they've never fought humans before, So Young observed. Exactly. Every species the swarm has faced uses similar tactical doctrines based on logical military theory. Humans, Minho smiled slightly. We approach warfare differently. So Young stood and walked to the window overlooking Earth's Luna base. The facility bustled with activity as ships came and went, carrying cargo and personnel throughout the solar system. It was a reminder of how far humanity had come in such a short time. 50 years ago, they had been confined to a single world. Now, they were being asked to save the galaxy. Summon the Strategic Planning Committee, she ordered. We need to discuss how to respond to this request. 2 hours later, Earth's top military minds gathered in the secure briefing room deep beneath Luna Base. General Hyun-tae from Army Command, Admiral Sung-min from the Navy, and Dr. Kyung-ja from Military Research all studied the Council's intelligence reports with growing interest. Their biggest mistake was trying to fight the swarm conventionally, General Hyun-tae observed. Linear tactics against an adaptive enemy. They might as well have handed the swarm their battle plans. Dr. Kyung-ja highlighted several sections of the technical data. Look at this. The swarm's adaptation process is incredibly sophisticated, but it's based on analyzing and countering known technological principles. What happens when they encounter something that doesn't follow those principles? They can't adapt to what? They can't understand, Admiral Sung-min concluded. But sending a conventional human fleet would just give them new technology to analyze and copy. So Young had been thinking along the same lines. Humanity's advantage wasn't superior technology or larger fleets. It was their completely different approach to solving problems. The key was to exploit that advantage without giving the swarm anything useful to learn from. "I have a proposal," she announced. "Instead of sending ships or fleets, we send one person. Someone who can think creatively and act independently. Someone who specializes in unconventional solutions." One person against an entire invasion fleet? General Hyun Tae looked skeptical. "That seems rather optimistic even for us." "The right person," So Young clarified. "Someone who can analyze the situation firsthand and develop countermeasures that the swarm won't be able to predict or adapt to." Commander Minho pulled up personnel files on his datapad. "You're thinking of someone from Special Operations? We have several candidates who specialize in impossible missions." "I'm thinking of Sergeant Major Kyung-soo," So Young replied. The room fell silent. Everyone knew that name. Kyung-soo had a reputation for solving problems that conventional military thinking couldn't touch. His service record read like a collection of impossible victories achieved through methods that defied standard doctrine. "He's perfect," Dr. Kyung-ja agreed after reviewing his file. "Demolitions expert, tactical improvisation specialist, and he has that peculiar human talent for making things work when they shouldn't." Admiral Sung-min was less convinced. "His methods are unorthodox, to put it mildly. Last year he stopped a space pirate fleet by convincing them their own ships were haunted. The year before that, he ended a hostage situation using nothing but cooking ingredients and a children's toy." "Exactly," So Young said. "The swarm won't know how to adapt to someone who doesn't follow any recognizable tactical pattern. Kyung-soo doesn't think like a traditional soldier. He thinks like, well, like a human." General Hyun Tae reviewed the mission parameters. "What kind of support would he need? Weapons? Equipment? A strike team?" "That's up to him," So Young decided. "We'll give him access to whatever he requests, but I suspect he'll want to keep things simple. Complex equipment gives the enemy more to analyze and understand." Commander Minho was already drafting the mission briefing. "His objective? Neutralize the swarm threat using any means necessary," So Young replied. "No restrictions on methods or tactics. Complete operational freedom." Dr. Kyung-ja smiled. "He'll love that. No oversight, no regulations, just results." "When do we inform the Council of our decision?" asked Admiral Sung-min. So Young considered the question. The Council expected humanity to send fleets and admirals, not a single sergeant with a toolkit. They would need careful explanation to understand why this approach made sense. "We tell them we're sending our most effective strategic asset," she decided. "They don't need to know the details until he arrives." General Hyun Tae chuckled. "They're going to be very surprised when they meet humanity's idea of a strategic response to their crisis." The meeting broke up with plans to contact Kyung-soo immediately. He was currently on leave after his last mission, probably enjoying the quiet life on his small farm in rural Korea. Soon he would be asked to save the galaxy using nothing but his wits and whatever materials he could scavenge. As the other officers filed out, Commander Minho remained behind with Admiral So Young. "Do you really think one person can make a difference against this threat?" So Young looked out at the stars, knowing that somewhere among them, an ancient evil was consuming worlds and enslaving populations. "Minho, I've read every report we have about this Nexus swarm. They're perfect at adapting to logical, predictable military responses, but Kyung-soo isn't logical or predictable. He's chaos with a purpose. And if he fails, then we'll know the galaxy is doomed anyway. But if anyone can find a way to confuse and defeat an enemy that learns from every encounter, it's someone who solves problems by refusing to acknowledge they're impossible." Within hours, a message would be sent to a small farm in Korea, asking a simple soldier to do what the galaxy's greatest military minds could not. It was typically human response to an impossible situation. Ignore conventional wisdom and trust in individual ingenuity. The Council would learn soon enough that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their fleets. It was their complete inability to approach any problem the way anyone else would expect. Beacon Station hung in space like a metal city, its lights twinkling against the star field beyond. For 300 years, it had served as the Galactic Council's primary military outpost on the frontier. Now it was their last major stronghold. Before swarm territory, crowded with refugees and desperate military personnel preparing for what many believed would be their final stand. Station Commander Jae-hoon watched through the observation deck as a small human ship approached the docking bay. The vessel was barely larger than a fighter craft by galactic standards, its hull scratched and worn from countless missions. It looked ancient compared to the sleek Council warships docked nearby. "That's humanity's response?" asked his aide, Communications Officer Da-eun. Her 4 eyes blinked in disbelief as she studied the approaching craft. "One ship? And one person?" Jae-hoon's tentacles writhed with barely contained frustration. For weeks, the Council had praised humanity's legendary military prowess. Stories had circulated about human soldiers achieving impossible victories through unconventional tactics. Now, their answer to the galaxy's greatest crisis appeared to be a single man in an outdated patrol boat. "Perhaps there's more than meets the eye," Jae-hoon replied, though his voice carried little conviction. "Humans are known for their unusual approaches." The human ship docked with a soft clang that echoed through the station's hull. 20 minutes later, Sergeant Major Kyung-soo walked through the airlock, carrying a single duffel bag and wearing a standard Earth military uniform. He looked completely ordinary. Average height, unremarkable features, with the calm expression of someone who had seen too much to be impressed by anything. "Sergeant Major Kyung-soo reporting as requested," he said simply, offering a crisp salute. To the assembled Council officers, Jae-hoon studied the human carefully. This was the galaxy's savior. The man looked more like a maintenance worker than an elite soldier. His uniform was clean but well worn, his equipment basic by any military standard. The only unusual thing about him was the way he observed everything around him with quick, calculating glances. "Welcome to Beacon Station," Jae-hoon replied, returning the salute awkwardly. "I trust your journey was acceptable?" "No problems," Kyung-soo answered, "though I noticed your outer sensor grid has some blind spots. Might want to fix that before the swarm shows up." Security Chief Young-ho checked his monitoring systems immediately. After a few minutes of analysis, his skin flushed with embarrassment. "He's right. There are 3 gaps in our coverage that we missed completely." Kyung-soo nodded politely. "Happens to everyone. Mind if I get a briefing on the current situation?" Communications Officer Da-eun led them to the station's command center, a massive circular room filled with holographic displays and tactical stations. The main screen showed real-time intelligence from the frontier, including swarm fleet movements and casualty reports from the latest engagements. "The situation is deteriorating rapidly," Da-eun explained, highlighting various sections of the display. "Our scouts report a massive swarm assault force moving toward Harvest Prime. 12 billion civilians live on that world, and its defenses are minimal." The tactical display showed Harvest Prime's pitiful defensive capability: 3 orbital platforms and a handful of patrol ships. Against a swarm fleet, they might as well have been armed with harsh language. How long until the attack? Kyung-soo asked. 18 hours, possibly less, replied Fleet Coordinator Min Seok. We're preparing evacuation ships, but there's no way to move 12 billion people in time. And your battle plan? Jae-hoon activated another display showing the Council's proposed response. Admiral Taemin is assembling every available ship for a defensive action. We'll attempt to hold the swarm at the system's edge while civilian transports escape. Kyung-soo studied the plan for several minutes, his expression neutral. The alien officers watched him nervously, waiting for some brilliant human insight that would solve their impossible problem. Finally, he looked up from the display. "That won't work," he said simply. "What do you mean?" demanded Fleet Coordinator Min Seok. "This plan represents our best tactical thinking." "I'm sure it does," Kyung-soo replied without offense. "But you're fighting the swarm like they're a normal enemy. They're not. Every conventional tactic you use just teaches them how to beat you better next time." Communications Officer Da-eun pulled up files from previous engagements. "Then what do you suggest? Our weapons barely damage their ships, and they adapt to everything we throw at them." "I need detailed schematics of swarm ship construction," Kyung-soo said. "Everything you have, hull composition, power systems, control networks, biological components. The more technical detail, the better." Security Chief Young-ho was confused by the request. "What good will that do? We already know their ships are heavily armored and self-repairing. I need to understand how they work before I can figure out how to make them stop working," Kyung-soo explained patiently. Station Commander Jae-hoon authorized access to the Council's complete intelligence database on swarm technology. It took 3 hours to download everything to Kyung-soo's portable terminal. While the transfer proceeded, the human made another unusual request. "I need a complete inventory of your industrial replicators," he said. "Everything they can produce, all available materials, production capacity." "Are you planning to build weapons?" asked Dr. Yunji, the station's chief scientist. "Maybe. Depends on what you have available." The inventory was extensive. Beacon stations, replicators could produce everything from starship components to basic consumer goods. The list included thousands of different materials, chemicals, and manufactured items. Kyung-soo reviewed the inventory with the same careful attention he had given to the swarm technical data. Occasionally, he would highlight certain items: industrial adhesives, basic electronics, civilian-grade chemicals, and surprisingly large quantities of something called duct tape. "Why do you need so much adhesive material?" asked Dr. Yunji. "Duct tape fixes everything," Kyung-soo replied, as if this explained everything. The alien officers exchanged confused glances. Their universal translators were working perfectly, but the humans' logic seemed to follow patterns they couldn't understand. As the day progressed, reports from the frontier grew more alarming. The swarm assault force was larger than initially estimated, and it was moving faster than expected. Admiral Taemin's fleet was still hours away from intercept position. "The attack will begin in 6 hours, Communications Officer Dae-yoon announced grimly. "If we're going to act, it has to be soon." Kyung-soo closed his portable terminal and shouldered his duffel bag. "I'll need access to one of your industrial workshops, somewhere I can work without interruption." "What are you planning to build?" Station Commander Jae-hoon asked. "Solutions," Kyung-soo replied cryptically. Security Chief Young-ho assigned him Workshop Bay 7, one of the larger industrial spaces in the station's lower levels. As Kyung-soo gathered his requested materials and headed for the workshop, The alien officers remained in the command center, unsure what to expect. "Do you think he actually has a plan?" asked Dr. Yunji. "I hope so," Jae-hoon replied, watching as another grim update arrived from the frontier. "Because if he doesn't, 12 billion people are going to die, and the swarm will be one step closer to conquering the galaxy." In Workshop Bay 7, Kyung-soo laid out his materials and began working with the methodical patience of someone who had solved impossible problems before. To the monitoring cameras, it looked like chaos, random components being combined in ways that violated several engineering principles. But to someone who understood human thinking, it was the beginning of something the swarm had never encountered before: pure, purposeful unpredictability. Workshop Bay 7 had become a place of chaos that somehow seemed purposeful. For 12 hours, Sergeant Major Kyung-soo had been dismantling equipment, mixing chemicals and building devices that didn't match any known weapon system in the Galactic database. The monitoring cameras showed a steady stream of apparently random activity that left the station's officers completely baffled. Security Chief Young-ho filed his third hourly report on the humans' activities. He's taken apart 17 different pieces of civilian equipment, including 3 food processors, a waste recycling unit, and something called a coffee machine, he told Station Commander Jae-hoon. "The materials he's combining shouldn't work together according to any engineering principle I understand." Dr. Yoon-ji had been studying the camera feeds with scientific fascination. "Look at this sequence," she said, highlighting a section where Kyung-soo attached electronic components to what appeared to be a child's toy. "He's creating some kind of circuit using parts that were never designed to interface with each other." "It dangerous?" asked Communications Officer Da-yoon, watching as the human mixed several chemicals that produced a small puff of green smoke. "I don't know," Dr. Yoon-ji admitted. "Our computers can't classify most of what he's building. The safety protocols keep issuing warnings about incompatible materials and unstable configurations, but nothing actually explodes." Station Commander Jae-hoon tried to focus on the bigger picture, but the humans' mysterious activities were impossible to ignore. In less than 6 hours, the swarm assault force would reach Harvest Prime. Admiral Taemin's fleet was moving into position for what everyone expected to be a desperate holding action. Meanwhile, their supposed human savior was building gadgets in a workshop like some kind of mad inventor. "Should I ask him what he's doing?" Young-ho suggested. "He said he didn't want interruptions," Jae-hoon replied reluctantly. "We have to trust that he knows what he's doing." In the command center, new reports painted an increasingly grim picture. The swarm assault force consisted of 27 massive ships, each one a biomechanical nightmare capable of adapting to any known weapon. Previous engagements had shown that even if the Council forces managed to damage one of these vessels, it would simply evolve stronger defenses and continue fighting. "Our fleet will reach the intercept point in 4 hours, announced Fleet Coordinator Min Seok. "Admiral Taemin is requesting final tactical updates." Communications Officer Da-eun hesitated before responding. How could she explain that humanity's contribution to the battle was one man building mysterious devices in a workshop? "Tell the Admiral that our human specialist is preparing his equipment." The swarm fleet's approach was being tracked by long-range sensors throughout the sector. Unlike conventional invasion forces, the swarm ships moved in complex patterns that seemed almost organic. They flowed through space like a school of predatory fish, adjusting their formation based on unknown signals from their collective intelligence. Dr. Yoon-ji had been studying these movement patterns for months. "The way they coordinate suggests a distributed consciousness," she observed. Each ship is both independent and part of a larger whole. When one learns something, they all learn it instantly. Which means our first shot is our only shot, Young Ho concluded. After that, they'll know everything about our tactics and weapons. The futility of their situation was becoming clear to everyone in the command center. How do you fight an enemy that learns from every encounter and shares that knowledge instantly across their entire force? Traditional military thinking had no answer to this problem. Deep in Workshop Bay 7, Kyung-soo seemed oblivious to the approaching crisis. He worked with the calm efficiency of someone following a plan that made perfect sense to him, even if no one else could understand it. His latest creation appeared to be a belt-mounted device that incorporated elements from a medical scanner, a food synthesizer, and something that might have been a decorative light fixture. "What do you think he's really doing down there?" Da-eun asked quietly. Dr. Yoon-ji enhanced the camera feed, trying to get a better view of the human's work. "I've been analyzing his methods, and there's definitely a pattern. He's not building weapons in any conventional sense. These devices seem designed to interface with technology in ways that shouldn't be possible." "Like what?" "Like that belt device. Based on the components he's used, it should be capable of generating electromagnetic pulses, analyzing biological signatures, and producing several different chemical compounds. But the way he's connected everything violates basic engineering principles." Young Ho frowned at the display. "Electromagnetic pulses against biomechanical enemies? It's more than that," Dr. Yoon-ji continued, her excitement growing as she understood more of what she was seeing. "He's not building tools to destroy the swarm. He's building tools to confuse them." The concept was so alien that it took several minutes for the implications to sink in. The Council's entire military strategy was based on defeating enemies through superior firepower or tactical advantage. But what if the goal wasn't to destroy the enemy? What if it was simply to present them with problems they couldn't solve? "The swarm adapts to logical, predictable responses," Dr. Yoon-ji explained. "But humans don't think logically, at least not in ways that other species can predict. If Kyung-soo can present the swarm with solutions that don't follow any recognizable pattern, they won't be able to adapt because they won't understand what they're adapting to," Station Commander Jae-hoon finished. "It was a brilliant strategy, assuming it worked. But it depended entirely on one human's ability to outthink a collective intelligence that had conquered dozens of star systems. The margin for error was essentially zero. Incoming priority transmission from Admiral Tae-min, announced communications. Officer Da-eun. The Admiral's image appeared on the main screen, his blue features tense with the strain of command. "Station Commander, I need an update on your human specialists' preparations. My fleet will engage the swarm in 3 hours, and I need to know what kind of support to expect." Jae-hoon glanced at the workshop monitors, where Kyung-soo was now testing one of his devices by pointing it at a metal bulkhead. The wall shimmered briefly, then returned to normal. "The specialist is finalizing his equipment, Admiral. His methods are unconventional, but our analysis suggests they may be effective against the swarm's adaptive capabilities." "Unconventional how?" "We're not entirely sure, sir. Human tactical thinking follows patterns that our computers can't classify." "Admiral." Taemin's expression grew even more strained. "So you're telling me that our plan depends on weapons and tactics that no one understands?" "That appears to be the idea, Admiral. The swarm can't adapt to what they can't comprehend." After a long pause, Tae-min nodded reluctantly. "Very well. Keep me informed of any developments. And, Commander, I hope your human knows what he's doing, because if this fails, Harvest Prime falls and the swarm gains access to the inner systems. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in tense silence. Through the workshop monitors, they could see Kyung-soo gathering his completed devices and checking them one final time. He had created 7 different tools, each one a seemingly impossible combination of components that somehow functioned despite violating established engineering principles. "He's finished," Dr. Yunji observed. "Now what?" asked Young-ho. As if in answer to his question, Kyung-soo looked directly at one of the monitoring cameras and spoke clearly. "I need transportation to the swarm flagship. Something fast and small." The command center erupted in shocked exclamations. Station Commander Jae-hoon stared at the monitor in disbelief. "Did he just say he wants to go to the enemy flagship?" "That's what it sounded like," Da-eun confirmed. Young-ho checked the translation matrix to make sure there hadn't been an error. "The computers confirm it. He wants direct transport to the swarm command vessel." Dr. Yunji was the first to understand the implications. "He's not planning to fight the swarm fleet. He's planning to talk to them." It was the most audacious strategy anyone had ever proposed against the Nexus swarm. No one had ever attempted direct communication with their collective intelligence. Most military experts assumed it was impossible. But if anyone could find a way to confuse and defeat an enemy through pure unpredictability, it would be someone who approached every problem as if conventional solutions didn't exist. The real question was whether the galaxy was ready for humanity's idea of diplomatic negotiation. The small council scout ship shot through space toward the swarm fleet like a metal dart aimed at a mechanical storm. Sergeant Major Kyung-soo sat calmly in the pilot's seat, his collection of improvised devices secured in an equipment bag beside him. To anyone watching, it looked like a suicide mission. To Kyung-soo, it was just another Tuesday. "Human vessel, you are approaching restricted combat zone." Admiral Tae-min's voice crackled through the communication system. "Please confirm your intentions." "I'm going to have a conversation with the swarm leadership," Kyung-soo replied casually, as if discussing the weather. "Might want to keep your fleet at a safe distance until I'm done." Station Commander Jae-hoon's voice joined the channel from Beacon Station. "Sergeant Major, are you certain about this approach? The swarm has never responded to diplomatic contact." "Before? That's because nobody's tried talking to them properly," Kyung-soo answered, checking his instrument readings. The massive swarm flagship was growing larger on his display, a twisted cathedral of biomechanical architecture that hurt to look at directly. The swarm fleet had detected his approach, but hadn't fired yet. The 27 massive ships moved, in their organic formation, like predators circling prey. Each vessel was unique, covered in writhing mechanical tendrils and pulsing biological components that seemed to breathe in the vacuum of space. Dr. Yoon-ji's voice came through from Beacon Station, tight with scientific fascination and fear. "The swarm ships are changing formation. They're actually responding to his approach." On sensors throughout the sector, military observers watched in amazement as the swarm fleet altered its attack pattern. Instead of rushing toward Harvest Prime, the ships began forming a defensive sphere around their flagship. It was unprecedented behavior from an enemy that had never shown interest in anything except conquest and assimilation. "This is impossible," Fleet Coordinator Min Seok muttered. "The swarm doesn't do defensive formations. They don't retreat, they don't negotiate, they just attack." Kyung-soo activated his ship's external communication array and began broadcasting. On all frequencies, What came out was a mixture of broken alien languages, mathematical sequences, and what sounded like someone trying to start a conversation with a very large, very dangerous machine. Attention, Swarm Collective. This is Sergeant Major Kyung-soo of Earth Military Command. I request permission to come aboard your flagship for direct communication. I challenge your leadership to single combat according to the ancient protocols. The response was immediate and shocking. The massive swarm flagship extended a docking tube toward Kyung-soo's tiny ship. Throughout the galaxy, military computers crashed trying to process what they were recording. The Nexus swarm, which had never acknowledged communication attempts from any species, was actually agreeing to meet with a single human soldier. They're actually letting him dock, Communications Officer Da-un whispered in disbelief. Admiral Taemin's fleet hung motionless in space, afraid to move, closer but unable to retreat. No one knew what to do when the enemy suddenly started following diplomatic protocols that shouldn't exist. Kyung-soo's ship connected to the swarm flagship with a metallic clang that echoed through dimensions of space that organic minds weren't meant to perceive. The docking tube sealed with an almost biological squelch, and atmosphere flooded the connection tunnel. "I'm going aboard," Kyung-soo announced, gathering his equipment bag. "If I'm not back in 2 hours, assume the conversation didn't go well." "Sergeant Major." "Wait," Dr. Yunji called urgently. "We have no idea what the environment is like inside that ship. The atmosphere readings are unusual." "Unusual how?" "The air is breathable, but it's also showing traces of biological compounds that shouldn't exist in a mechanical environment. It's like the ship is alive." "Most things are alive, if you think about them the right way," Kyung-soo replied philosophically. "Besides, I've breathed worse air at family barbecues." He sealed his helmet and activated the personal protection field built into his suit. The devices in his equipment bag hummed quietly, their impossible combinations of technology somehow working in harmony despite violating every known engineering principle. The airlock opened, and Kyung-soo stepped into the swarm flagship. The interior was a nightmare fusion of organic curves and mechanical precision. Walls pulsed with biological rhythms, while mechanical components clicked and whirred in complex patterns. The air smelled of ozone and something that might have been flowers, if flowers grew in the void between stars. Corridors stretched in directions that hurt to follow with human eyes. The geometry was wrong, designed by minds that thought in dimensions organic brains couldn't fully process. But Kyung-soo walked forward calmly, following signs that appeared to be written in mathematics and neural impulses. After 10 minutes of walking through passages that seemed to rearrange themselves when he wasn't looking directly at them, Kyung-soo arrived at what could only be described as a throne room. The chamber was vast, filled with biomechanical trees that grew from the floor in spiraling patterns. At the center, on a throne made of living metal and crystallized thought, sat the Nexus Prime. The entity was beautiful and horrible in equal measure. Part organic brain, part quantum computer, part something else entirely. Tendrils of light connected it to every surface in the room, making it impossible to tell where the creature ended and the ship began. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere at once. "Human," the Nexus Prime said, its words carrying harmonics that human ears couldn't fully process. "You are unusual. We have analyzed thousands of species. All follow predictable patterns. You do not." "Nice to meet you, too," Kyung-soo replied, setting down his equipment bag with deliberate casualness. "Thanks for agreeing to this meeting. I have to say your ship has interesting interior design." Very organic. The Nexus Prime's optical sensors focused on the human with obvious confusion. You are not afraid. Should I be? All organic life fears the swarm. Fear is logical. We represent the end of chaotic biological existence and the beginning of perfect order. Kyung-soo looked around the throne room with the eye of someone who had seen many strange things. Perfect order, huh? That explains the tentacles growing out of the walls. Very orderly. Your responses do not follow established psychological patterns, the Nexus Prime observed. We cannot categorize your mental processes. That's probably for the best, Kyung-soo said, beginning to examine the various biomechanical interfaces around the room. His devices beeped quietly as they scanned the alien technology. Most people can't figure out how I think either. The Nexus Prime attempted to analyze the human's equipment but found nothing recognizable. The devices used familiar components but combined them in ways that produced effects beyond the sum of their parts. It was like trying to understand music by analyzing individual sound waves. "What is your purpose here, human?" the entity finally asked. "I came to discuss your assimilation plans," Kyung-soo replied, still examining the room's strange architecture. "Specifically, I wanted to explain why they won't work." Impossible. Our analysis indicates 97.3% probability of complete galactic conquest within 2 stellar cycles. Your analysis is wrong, Kyung-soo said simply. You've made a fundamental error in your calculations. The Nexus Prime's attention focused entirely on the human. For the first time in its existence, it encountered a statement that didn't fit into its predictive models. Explain this error. Kyung-soo smiled and reached into his equipment bag. Well, the problem is that you're trying to make sense of humans. That never ends well for anybody. His hand found the device he had been looking for, and he began to understand exactly how the swarm's biomechanical integration systems worked. More importantly, he understood how to make them stop working. The Nexus Prime leaned forward on its throne of living metal, its countless optical sensors focusing on the small human who stood calmly in the heart of its flagship. Around them, the biomechanical walls pulsed with the rhythm of an artificial heart, and tendrils of neural energy flickered between organic processors. You claim our calculations contain error, the entity said, its voice carrying undertones of digital analysis. This is impossible. We have processed the tactical capabilities of 47 different species. Human military capacity falls within acceptable parameters. Kyung-soo nodded agreeably, while his trained eye cataloged the room's various systems. Years of demolitions work had taught him to spot critical infrastructure, and the swarm's biomechanical fusion created vulnerabilities that purely technological ships wouldn't have. Organic components needed different things than mechanical ones, and when you mixed the two together, interesting problems emerged. See, that's your first mistake, he said, pulling out one of his improvised devices and checking its readings. You're analyzing human military capacity like it follows some kind of logical pattern. All military doctrine follows logical patterns, the Nexus Prime stated with absolute certainty. Tactical analysis, resource allocation, strategic planning, these are mathematical functions with predictable outcomes. Maybe for your species, Kyung-soo replied, pretending to stumble slightly as he moved closer to what appeared to be a decorative panel on the wall. His scanner had identified it as something much more important. But humans don't really do the logical thing very often. The Nexus Prime attempted to process this statement and found it incompatible with its understanding of evolved intelligence. Illogical behavior reduces survival probability. Species that make irrational decisions become extinct. You'd think so, wouldn't you? Kyung-soo said conversationally. But here's the thing about humans. We've been making terrible decisions for thousands of years, and we keep getting stronger. It's like the universe rewards us for being unpredictable. As he spoke, Kyung-soo continued his casual examination of the throne room. The Nexus Prime watched his movements but couldn't identify any pattern or purpose. The human seemed to be wandering aimlessly, touching various surfaces and checking devices that produced no recognizable readings. Your species achieved space. Flight through logical application of scientific principles, the Nexus Prime pointed out. Your technology follows established physical laws. You are not as chaotic as you claim. Our technology, sure, Kyung-soo agreed. But the way we use it? That's where things get interesting. He pulled out another device, this one incorporating components from a medical scanner and a children's toy. As it hummed to life, the Nexus Prime attempted to analyze its function, and failed completely. The device shouldn't work according to any known engineering principle, yet it was clearly operating and producing some kind of output. For example, Kyung-soo continued, your ships are really impressive. Biomechanical integration, adaptive armor, collective intelligence networking, very sophisticated. But they all depend on one assumption. State this assumption. That the problems you encounter will follow predictable patterns that can be analyzed and solved through logical processes. The Nexus Prime processed this statement and found it obviously correct. All problems can be solved through sufficient analysis and adaptation. Can they? Kyung-soo asked, moving even closer to the decorative panel. His scanner showed that it was actually a primary neural relay connected to the ship's central consciousness matrix. What happens when you encounter a problem that gets worse the more you try to solve it? This scenario is impossible. Additional analysis always improves solution efficiency. Is that so? Kyung-soo smiled and activated the device in his hand. Let me show you something interesting about human engineering. The device emitted a soft beep and projected a hologram showing the internal structure of the swarm ship. The Nexus Prime observed the display with growing confusion as Kyung-soo highlighted various systems and their interconnections. See, the brilliant thing about your biomechanical design is how everything connects to everything else, Kyung-soo explained. When one part learns something, it shares that information with every other part instantly. Very efficient. Correct. This allows for optimal adaptation and resource allocation. Right up until someone gives your network information that creates recursive loops instead of solutions. The Nexus Prime attempted to understand this concept, but found it outside its experience parameters. Clarify this statement. Well, imagine you encounter a problem that your adaptation systems can't categorize properly. So they try harder to understand it, which makes the problem more complex, which requires more analysis, which makes it even more complex, and so on. Such problems do not exist. They do if you're dealing with humans, Kyung-soo said, and casually bumped his elbow into the decorative panel. The contact seemed completely accidental, just a clumsy human stumbling slightly in an unfamiliar environment. But the device concealed in Kyung-soo's sleeve delivered a precisely calculated electromagnetic pulse directly into the ship's primary neural relay. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The Nexus Prime's optical sensors flared as alien data flooded its consciousness matrix. The pulse hadn't been a weapon in any conventional sense. Instead, it was a carrier wave for something much more dangerous. Human logic patterns, embedded in seemingly random information. "What have you done?" the entity demanded, its voice distorting, as its processing systems struggled to analyze the incoming data. "I gave your network a problem to solve," Kyung-soo replied calmly. "Specifically, I uploaded a complete database of human military decision-making processes from the last 100 years. The Nexus Prime attempted to categorize this information and found it impossible. Human tactical decisions seemed to follow no consistent pattern. Units that should have retreated attacked instead. Commanders made choices that violated basics, strategic principles, and somehow achieved victory. Entire battles were won using methods that shouldn't work according to any military theory. This data is corrupt," the entity protested, but its adaptation systems were already trying to process and learn from the human examples. "These tactical patterns are impossible." "Are they?" Kyung-soo asked. "Because according to my history lessons, those impossible tactics won a lot of battles." The ship around them began to shudder as the Nexus Prime's consciousness matrix tried to adapt to information that became more contradictory the more it was analyzed. Biomechanical systems started experiencing conflicts as organic components attempted to implement tactical solutions that their mechanical counterparts couldn't execute. "You see," Kyung-soo continued, checking another of his devices, "the problem with being able to adapt to anything is that eventually you encounter something you shouldn't try to adapt to. Human military logic is like a virus for minds that think too logically." "Impossible!" the Nexus Prime shrieked, its voice now coming from multiple speakers at once. "We will analyze these patterns. We will find the underlying logic." "Good luck with that," Kyung-soo said sincerely. "Humans have been trying to understand human military logic for centuries, and we still can't figure it out either." The ship's systems began failing in cascade as the network tried to process tactical examples where human forces had achieved victory by doing exactly the wrong thing at exactly the right time. The adaptation algorithms entered recursive loops, trying to counter solutions that shouldn't theoretically work. Through the throne room's biomechanical walls, Kyung-soo could hear systems shutting down as the corruption spread. His pulse had infected the ship's collective intelligence with the most dangerous virus he could imagine, the complete inability to make sense of human behavior. "This is not logical!" the Nexus Prime wailed as its consciousness began fragmenting. "Exactly," Kyung-soo replied. "That's why it works." Throughout the swarm fleet, 27 massive ships began experiencing the same cascade failure that was tearing apart their flagship. The collective intelligence network that had been their greatest strength now became their greatest weakness, as corrupted data spread like wildfire through every connected system. Admiral Taman watched from his command ship as impossible readings flooded his sensors. "What in the name of the ancient stars is happening to them?" he demanded, staring at displays that showed swarm vessels literally tearing themselves apart. "It appears to be some kind of systems failure," reported his tactical officer, her voice filled with disbelief. "Their biomechanical components are rejecting their mechanical ones. Internal explosions, power failures, complete loss of coordination." On Beacon Station, Dr. Yoon-ji frantically analyzed the incoming data while trying to understand what Kyung-soo had actually done. "The corruption is spreading through their network faster than any computer virus we've ever recorded," she announced. "Whatever he uploaded into their system is causing complete breakdown of their adaptive algorithms." Station Commander Jae-hoon watched the tactical display with growing amazement. The swarm fleet, which had seemed invincible just hours ago, was falling apart before their eyes. Some ships drifted helplessly as their control systems crashed. Others broke apart as their biological components literally rejected their mechanical parts. "I'm picking up a transmission from the human," Communications Officer Daun announced. "Audio only, coming from inside the flagship." Kyung-Soo's voice crackled through the communication system with the calm tone of someone reporting routine. "Maintenance. This is Sergeant Major Kyung-Soo to all Council forces. Mission accomplished. The Swarm Collective is experiencing what humans call a logic error. Their ships should be non-functional within the next few minutes." "How?" Admiral Taman demanded. "What did you do to them?" "I gave them homework they can't finish," Kyung-Soo replied simply. "Turns out that when you build your entire civilization around being able to adapt to anything, you become vulnerable to things that don't make sense to adapt to." Dr. Yunji was beginning to understand the brilliant simplicity of the humans' strategy. "He didn't attack their ships or their weapons," she explained to the confused officers around her. "He attacked their ability to think logically." The Nexus Prime's voice echoed through the communication channel, distorted and fragmenting as its consciousness matrix continued to collapse. "Human, what have you done? Our calculations, the patterns, they cannot be resolved." "That's the point," Kyung-Soo responded patiently. "You're trying to find logical patterns in human military history. That's like trying to divide by zero. It just breaks your brain." Throughout the fleet, swarm ships were experiencing total system failures as their collective intelligence tried desperately to understand tactical decisions that violated every principle of rational warfare. How do you adapt to an enemy that wins battles by doing things that should guarantee defeat? How do you counter strategies that work specifically because they shouldn't work? "The feedback is spreading to their entire network," Dr. Yunji reported, with growing excitement. "Every ship is trying to process the same impossible data, and they're all failing in cascade. It's like watching an entire computer network crash from a single corrupted file." Security Chief Young Ho monitored the battle, reports coming in from across the sector. 17 swarm ships have gone completely dark. The others are showing massive internal failures. Some are actually breaking apart. On the main display, they could see one of the massive biomechanical vessels literally coming apart at the seams. Its organic components were physically separating from its mechanical ones, as if the ship's consciousness could no longer hold the two halves together. "How is this possible?" Admiral Taemin asked. "These ships survived direct hits from our most powerful weapons." "Physical attacks they could adapt to," Dr. Yunji explained. "But this human found a way to attack their minds instead of their hulls. He made them try to solve a problem that becomes more complex the harder they work on it." Kyung-Soo's voice came through the communication system again, still maddeningly calm. "I'm heading back to my ship now. The Nexus Prime is having what I believe humans would call a nervous breakdown. Might want to clear the area before its flagship decides to explode." "Wait," Admiral Taemin called. "How do we know this effect is permanent? What if they recover?" "They won't," Kyung-Soo replied with complete confidence. "The data I uploaded includes about 3,000 examples of human tactical decisions that worked despite being completely irrational. Their collective intelligence will spend the next few centuries trying to understand how humans won the Battle of Thermopylae by choosing to fight impossible odds, or how we ended World War II by dropping the sun on people twice." "Dropping the sun on people?" Communications Officer Dayun repeated in confusion. "Nuclear weapons. Long story. Point is, every time they think they've figured out the pattern, they'll encounter another example that breaks their understanding completely. It's like trying to solve a puzzle where the pieces keep changing shape." The swarm flagship was now visibly deteriorating as its biomechanical systems fought against each other. Massive sections of hull plating were breaking away, and the ship's organic components were writhing in apparent agony. "I'm clear of the flagship," Kyung-soo announced. "Recommend everyone move to minimum safe distance. The Nexus Prime is about to learn what humans call catastrophic decompression." Admiral Tae-min ordered his fleet to retreat to a safer position, though he kept sensors trained on the dying swarm vessels. As they watched, the flagship's hull began to crack along its biomechanical seams. The creature that had been a ship was literally tearing itself apart, trying to resolve impossible contradictions. "This is incredible," Dr. Yoon-ji breathed. "He didn't destroy them with superior firepower or advanced technology. He destroyed them with pure information. He gave their perfect adaptation system a problem it couldn't solve." The flagship exploded in a cascade of biological and mechanical components, its death throes broadcasting across the swarm network and causing even more failures throughout the fleet. Ships that had been invincible hours ago were now drifting. Hulks, their collective intelligence shattered by exposure to human logic. "Final count," reported the tactical officer. 27 swarm vessels completely disabled. No survivors detected. The fleet is gone. Admiral Tae-min stared at the debris field where the galaxy's greatest threat had just self-destructed. One human, one man with a toolkit and an understanding of his own species' irrationality. "And an elbow," Communications Officer Da-eun added quietly. "Don't forget the elbow." According to his report, the critical moment was when he accidentally bumped into their neural relay. "Accidentally," Dr. Yoon-ji said with a knowing smile. "I'm beginning to suspect that nothing this human does is actually accidental." Kyung-soo's voice came through the communication system one final time. "This is Sergeant Major Kyung-soo requesting permission to return to Beacon Station. I need to file my after-action report, and I could really use a cup of coffee. Fighting impossible battles always makes me thirsty." As his small ship headed back toward the station, Admiral Tae-min found himself reviewing everything he thought. He knew about human military capabilities. The galaxy had just been saved not through superior technology or tactical brilliance, but through the simple application of human unpredictability to an enemy that couldn't understand unpredictability. It was, he realized, the most perfectly human solution possible to an impossible problem. 3 months after what historians were already calling the elbow incident, the Galactic Council chamber looked very different than it had during those desperate days when the Nexus swarm threatened to consume everything. The emergency lighting had been replaced with normal illumination, and the faces of the assembled delegates showed cautious optimism instead of fear. Admiral So Young stood at the center of the great circular room, wearing the formal dress uniform of Earth Command. Beside her, Sergeant Major Kyung-soo looked slightly uncomfortable in his own dress blues, clearly preferring his standard work clothes to the ceremonial outfit required for galactic diplomatic functions. Counselor Wu Jin rose from his crystal throne, his ancient voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "Admiral So Young, representatives of humanity, the Galactic Council formally recognizes Earth as a Tier 1 strategic ally, with all the rights and responsibilities that status entails." A murmur of approval rippled through the assembled delegates. 3 months ago, many of these same beings had considered humans too primitive and dangerous to be trusted with advanced responsibilities. The complete destruction of the swarm fleet had changed many minds about human capabilities. "We accept this honor," Admiral So Young replied formally. "Earth looks forward to contributing to galactic peace and security." Admiral Tae-min, now promoted to Chief of Galactic Defense, stepped forward to address the assembly. The Council wishes to establish permanent human advisory positions within our military command structure. Recent events have demonstrated that human tactical thinking provides unique advantages in dealing with unconventional threats. We're willing to help, So Young said, but with one condition. Human advisors will only be deployed in situations where conventional military solutions have completely failed. We prefer to be a last resort rather than a first option. Dr. Yunji, who had been promoted to Director of Strategic Analysis after her groundbreaking research on human tactics, nodded approvingly. This approach makes perfect sense. Human methods work best when applied to impossible problems. Captain Jin Woo, now holding the newly created position of Galactic Defense Coordinator, had spent the last 3 months developing training protocols that could help alien officers understand human military thinking. His first manual, Expecting the Unexpected, a guide to human military logic, had become required reading throughout the Council Military Academy. The key insight, Jin Woo explained to the assembled delegates, is that humans don't try to solve problems the way they should be solved. They solve them the way that works, even if that way doesn't make sense to anyone else. Fleet Commander Hae Jin had been studying human tactical examples for weeks, trying to understand the patterns that had destroyed the swarm. I've analyzed 17 different human military victories, and I still can't predict what approach humans will take in any given situation. That's the point, Kyung-soo said quietly. If you can't predict what we're going to do, neither can I, the enemy. Communications Officer Da Yoon presented the latest intelligence reports from the Galactic Rim. Long-range sensors indicate that surviving swarm forces have retreated to the galactic core. They appear to be rebuilding, but very differently than before. Different how? Asked Station Commander Jae-hoon. Their new ships show much less biomechanical integration. They seem to have abandoned their collective intelligence network in favor of more conventional artificial intelligence systems. It's as if they're afraid to use their own adaptation technology. Dr. Yoon-ji smiled at this news. They learned something from their encounter with human logic, but not what they intended to learn. Instead of figuring out how to counter human unpredictability, they decided to avoid anything that might expose them to it again. Security Chief Young-ho had been monitoring communications from across the galaxy. There are reports of other aggressive species changing their expansion plans after learning about the swarm's defeat. Word is spreading that humans can solve impossible military problems, which means, Admiral Tae-min observed, that humanity's reputation is now working as a deterrent. Potential aggressors are reconsidering their plans because they're afraid of what humans might do to them. Kyung-soo shifted uncomfortably at all the attention focused on him. When reporters from across the galaxy had asked him to explain his victory over the Nexus swarm, he had simply shrugged and said, "I just tried not to overthink it. Sometimes you bump into the right solution by accident." The statement had become famous throughout the galaxy, though most alien analysts still couldn't understand what he meant by it. The concept that the right solution might come from not thinking too hard was completely foreign to species that had built their civilizations on logical analysis and careful planning. The real lesson, Dr. Yoon-ji told the assembly, is that there's tremendous value in approaching problems from completely different perspectives. Human chaos isn't random. It's purposeful unpredictability applied to situations where conventional approaches have failed. Admiral So Young concluded the ceremony with a brief address to the Council. Humanity is honored to serve alongside the galactic community in defending against threats that conventional military thinking cannot counter. We promise to continue being exactly as unpredictable and illogical as the situation requires. As the formal proceedings ended, delegates began filing out of the chamber, many still shaking their heads in amazement at how a single human with basic equipment had achieved what the galaxy's most advanced fleets could not. Young alien cadets at military academies throughout Council space were now studying human tactical examples, trying desperately to understand how calculated randomness and controlled chaos could be more effective than perfect strategy. Their instructors had given up trying to explain human logic and instead focused on teaching students to recognize when conventional approaches wouldn't work. The galaxy had learned something fundamental about the universe. Sometimes, the best way to solve an impossible problem was to approach it with the complete inability to think about it the way anyone else would. In the end, that was humanity's greatest gift to the galactic community. Not advanced technology or superior firepower, but the beautiful, dangerous ability to look at any situation and immediately start thinking about it wrong. On his transport back to Earth, Kyung-soo sat quietly reading reports about new threats emerging in distant sectors. Aggressive machine intelligences, spacefaring hive minds, and reality-warping entities that existed outside normal dimensions. All of them presented challenges that conventional military thinking couldn't address. He smiled slightly and made a note to pack extra duct tape for his next mission. The galaxy was a strange and dangerous place, but it was also full of interesting problems that needed solving in ways that nobody expected. Somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, impossible threats waited to test the galaxy's defenses. When they arrived, they would discover what the Nexus Swarm had learned too late. The most dangerous weapon in the universe was a human who refused to acknowledge that problems were supposed to be impossible, and sometimes the fate of entire civilizations could turn on something as simple as an accidental bump of an elbow in exactly the right place at exactly the right time.